Thank you all so much for being here today. We appreciate your support so much. I'm here with Every Dog, a nonprofit here in Austin, Texas, dedicated to making sure that everybody has the behavior resources that they need. Thanks for everybody who donated tonight and signed up for this webinar. We appreciate your donations so much. And if you would like to donate, you can do that at everydogaustin.org/donate. Some quick reminders tonight. We are going to have all of the questions go into the chat box, and we will take those at the end of the webinar. This webinar is going to be recorded, and we will send it out in the next couple days to all of those who have joined us tonight. We are going to go ahead and kick it off to our speaker to get started. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm talking about navigating the loss of a pet. So just start with who I am and what I know. My name's Carrie Hoare. I am a certified dog behavior consultant, a professional dog trainer, and a certified pet loss bereavement specialist in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I founded Crimson Hound LLC, my dog training company, so that I could provide private dog behavior consulting and dog training in the area. And I specialize in helping dogs who have experienced, sorry about that, who have experienced trauma and those that are exhibiting fearful, anxious, aggressive type behaviors. So what do I know about pet loss? I grew up with a menagerie of animals in Montana, and I learned about pet loss at a pretty young age. Throughout the presentation, the animal pictures that you're seeing are just a few of those that I have loved and lost over the years, and they are pretty much the reason that I chose to become a pet loss grief specialist, so that I can help others with this really hard transition in life. In addition to this work, dog training, etc., I also support pet guardians facing mental health and substance abuse challenges, and helping them strengthen their dog-human relationship and helping them promote long-term well-being with them and their pets. Currently, I live with 2 Australian Shepherds, Pippin and Possum, and a cat named Draco. And so let's get started. I love the quote, "Where there is love and loss, there is grief," because it always will be that way. Grief is experienced whenever a person loses a beloved pet or a person, regardless of how that loss occurs. So it could be the unexpected grief of a sudden loss, the grief that is experienced every time you notice your aging pet is approaching the end of their natural life expectancy. My 2 dogs are older, seniors, and I'm going through that stage right now. The anticipatory grief of that same life expectancy and medical euthanasia, the often guilt-ridden grief that comes with the decision of behavioral euthanasia, and the really often overlooked grief of loss and the lack of closure when a pet goes missing or is lost through rehoming, divorce, etc. When we bring a pet home, we anticipate giving that animal the best life that we possibly can. And in having an animal companion, we have the responsibility to always keep their well-being at the forefront of our mind. And when the time comes, it's also our responsibility to give them a good death. And so the key to providing both a good life and a good death is always thinking in terms of quality of life and not in quantity of days lived. When you're caring for an aging pet, so we don't have any control over the time leading up to a sudden loss. So let's just start with those instances where we do have some control over what's happening as we enter that before death stage. So in general, as pets age, they're going to experience a progressive loss of function in such areas as sensory loss due to cataracts, blindness, deafness, etc. They lose strength and coordination. Their metabolism slows down, so they might eat less, sleep more, gain or lose weight, and those should always all be taken into account. So as your pet moves through those stages, we want to think about accessibility. So with blind and deaf dogs, thinking about keeping things stable and in place. So don't leave a bunch of things lying around on the floor. Don't change your furniture around a lot. And think about startling, and perhaps when that pet gets lost, how are you going to be extra careful that your deaf or blind dog doesn't get lost and wander out in the street or not hear you when you call them. Loss of strength and coordination. So thinking about non-slip rugs, step tape, ramps, for cars, for beds, and even for cat trees. Baby gates for stairs, switching to a couple of short walks rather than a long walk. Adjusting your gait on walks as your pet's pace slows down. Increased veterinary care. That's going to happen as a dog gets older and starts to get sick more often and has more aches and pains. When we think about pain, in addition to more medication and veterinary advice, thinking about providing comfortable, like orthopedic beds, maybe a padded harness, being much more delicate with your handling and your grooming. When a dog is sore or painful, they're going to be much more sensitive to pulling on their hair and things like that. So adjusting your activities to your dog's ability. And then a really important one, I think, is creating memories. So visit your favorite places that you love to explore and walk with your dog. Photographs, artwork, scrapbooks, whatever you kind of would like to do with that animal. Think about those things ahead of time. Generally, we really don't think about plans and loss until it happens or till we get a diagnosis. So, your pet isn't feeling well or he didn't eat breakfast. So you take him to the vet and suddenly you have this unplanned diagnosis. So now what? Now what do you do with that? So first of all, I would say ask questions. Ask whatever questions you can think of in that moment. And with the knowledge that you're going to forget to ask a lot of things in that moment. Talk about prognosis, talk about timeline, talk about treatment options. And then don't make rash decisions, right? You may regret that later on. So think about it. Think through all of your options. Unless it's an emergency situation, you're going to have time to do that. Consider getting a second opinion, asking your vet for someone else to go to. They're more than likely going to be happy to share that information. Then once you have that, go home, think through all of your options, your information. Once you're feeling like you're able and ready, then schedule another appointment with your veterinarian, either in person or phone conversation. And again, review that prognosis over again, review your treatment options, and ask more questions. And now you're going to have all the information that you need to make a fully informed and a well thought out decision for your pet. So let's say that you go in and you're asking your vet, what are my options? So thinking about treatment or maybe palliative care. And that's a really good thing to kind of start with your vet is, what are my options in either or? Your veterinarian might be able to provide you with medications, with treatment options, with changes that you can make around the house that might improve your dog's quality of life and extend their life. So, maybe there's a medication that would be a game changer for a diagnosis of epileptic seizure, something like that. I don't know why my screen keeps jumping. I apologize for that. It may be that there's no additional medical or home interventions that are going to give enough improvement to provide comfort and quality of life. And if that's the case, then it's going to be time to talk about palliative care and euthanasia with your veterinarian. And so let's just take one step back and say treatment options. Let's say you've talked over with the treatment options with your vet and you've decided, I'm going to try and go ahead with that. So here's a kind of a short list of things that you're going to need to consider and plan for. There's obviously many more things, but these are some of the major ones. If there's going to be medication, make sure that you know the appropriate schedule, the dosage. Make sure that you know before you go home with that medication in your pet that you're going to be able to administer it and that you know how. Is that medication going to be administrable at home, or are you going to have to come into the clinic to have it done? If you're going to have to go into the clinic, how many times a week, how long you're going to have to be there, and is your pet going to be able to handle that? Dogs that are terrified of the veterinarian, that may be a option ending answer. If your pet is terrified to go to the vet and your treatment option is, every day for, 5 days a week for 3 months for treatment, and that's just going to be too much for your pet. If there's a surgical option, the first thing you're going to have to sign is a DNR. That's a do not resuscitate order. So you're going to have to decide if something happens unexpected during the surgery, do you want the vet to attempt to resuscitate, or do you want them to just let them pass? And then again, you're going to have to talk about aftercare, and again, make sure that you have the supplies you need and you're able to carry out that aftercare once you get home. Other treatment options, there may be chemotherapy, blood transfusions, dialysis. You're going to have to go over all of those things, right? And, think about many of these treatments are only going to extend life for a period of time, right? My dog Finn, that's in the picture behind me, passed away about a year and a half ago with he just was not hungry one morning, and I took him to the vet, and a week later he passed of lung cancer, completely out of the blue. And he was a three-legged dog, enjoyed plodding around the yard. And our options for treatment for surgery would only extend his life for a matter of maybe days or weeks. And so the quality of life that he would have, and having to go through an open chest surgery and the recovery from that, being a three-legged dog, was just not, it just wasn't viable for us to offer him that type of poor quality of life in the time that he had left. So it's really imperative that you think about, when is enough enough, and when does this become more about you and your fear of losing your beloved pet, and not about your pet's quality of life. So in the end, all of these decisions have to come down to quality of life versus quantity of days lived, and they always have to be the thing that guides your decisions. So what about palliative care? So comfort is key, right? With palliative care, we now understand that our pet is not going to get better, and we're basically simply providing comfort until it's time to say goodbye. So work closely with your veterinarian, right? Ask again about medications and other ways you can keep your pet comfortable, whether there's pain meds, nausea medications, appetite stimulants. And again, when we get into appetite stimulants, is your pet saying, I don't want to eat because I'm ready? So again, thinking about quality of life. Be sure again that you understand all about those medications. How and when should you contact your vet? Who should you contact if your vet isn't available? And what do you do in case of an emergency? Supplies. You're going to need lots of supplies. You might want to overstock so that you don't have to go out and buy more. So think in terms of, do you need bandages, potty pads, diapers, belly bands, a comfortable bed, and resting spots that your dog loves to lay in, right? If your dog loves to lay in the middle of the living room in the sun, put his bed in the middle of the living room in the sun, right? Mobility harnesses, the help me up harnesses with the handles on top to help your dogs up and down the stairs. And then thinking about those high value nutritious foods that they're going to want towards the end. So maybe a canned version of your dog food. Baby food meat is a good one. And then in kind of the same format are the churros, the tubes of pureed meat that you can get to give for cats or treats. Those make a nice nutritious meal for a dog as well. And then you may want to think, if you have the service available in your area, is hospice for your pet to help you maybe be able to still go to work, or just have a few minutes to yourself to collect yourself while you're caring for your pet. Planning ahead. There's so much planning ahead that you really need to think about. So there's going to be many decisions that you're going to have to make when dealing with the loss or the impending loss, and all of those decisions that are involved with all of that. I would encourage you to plan ahead as much as you can so that you're not left trying to make quick decisions in the moment, because your head is not going to be in it. How will you know when it's time? So we're going to look at how to use quality of life scales. End of life decisions, after life decisions, right? So when we think about planning ahead and what can you do, these pictures of of the 4 dogs that I had, and I took these pictures just about 2 years ago, and I am so glad I did. I took each one with their favorite toy. And Finn in the upper left-hand corner, I lost him about 6 months after I took these photos. I never would have, thought in the last minute that I would need to take his picture. And then Maisie, the greyhound up here in the upper right-hand corner, we just lost her in March. And so I'm just so glad that I took these pictures of them with their favorite toys. When we think about quality of life, and we think about how do you know when it's time? All right, so you always hear, they'll let you know when it's time. They'll let you know when it's ready. So yeah, sure. If you've been through it before, if you're in the mind space, if you're knowledgeable and objective enough to see the changes, and that your dog is showing you recognizable changes, sure, you can figure out when it's time. But having a quality of life scale is still going to be an excellent tool to help you, because this is going to be one of the most difficult decisions you've ever made, right? There's multiple quality of life scales out there online, printable, etc. This one's pretty easy to use. It's just got some categories. You gauge them on a Likert scale of 0 to 10. 0 is the worst it can be, 10 is the best it can be. You add up your scores in each category, and if you are under 35 points, it's definitely time to talk about euthanasia with your vet, right? Ask for help if you don't feel like you're able to judge your pet's health status objectively. Again, it's hard to do this, not only because you're deciding when to help your pet pass on, but it's hard when you're living in the moment, minute to minute, day to day, to decide, is he eating? Is it worse than it was yesterday? Is it worse than it was 2 days ago? Right. And so, when you're in the moment, it's hard to be objective, and it's hard to see what's happening. And so, I will tell you from my own experience, when I lost my Finn last year, I remember sitting and holding him in the veterinary's office while the technician was putting in his IV line. And this thought flashed through my head in the moment of, you don't have to do this. You can just pick him up and go home right now. But, right, that's me. That's me thinking about my own feelings in the moment. That's not me thinking about Finn's quality of life. And so ask a friend to help. You can contact someone like me, a pet bereavement specialist, to help you. You can contact a trainer to help you. You can contact your veterinarian to help you make these decisions. It's nothing that you have to do on your own. And no one's going to tell you that. They'll tell you, yes, I think it's time, but they will not tell you, you have to do it today. No one is going to tell you that, right? They're just going to help guide you and help you make that decision. Thinking about anticipatory grief, something that we don't think about that much, but it's definitely a thing, so the journey towards the end is going to come with that anticipatory grief, right? This internal acknowledgement that comes when you realize my pet is reaching the end of their life and I'm going to be lost, right? This feeling of sorrow about your impending loss. And it's all very similar to what happens when you actually have lost your pet, right? The after-death grief. So what can you do to help yourself through that anticipatory grief? The first thing is, remember that your feelings are valid and they're very normal, right? Don't let someone say, oh my gosh, she's not dead yet, quit crying about it, or something like that. Your feelings are valid, right? You're thinking about and putting yourself in a place where you only have a limited time left with that animal. Try to be in the moment as much as you can. So don't worry about potty accidents or fur on the furniture. You can clean all that up later on, right? So think about sharing those special moments with your pet. But again, as you think about where we're going to go, what we're going to do, keep your pet in mind and keep their abilities and their needs in mind. So I see these bucket lists all the time out there of, I took my dog across the country on a road trip when he was passing away so he could go to the beach and he could ride a motorbike and he could see the ocean. Your dog doesn't think of any of those things. Your dog is thinking, I want to spend time with my person, right? Support is so important. If you have any kind of a support network, lean on them. So besides friends and family, you might want to seek out help from a pet loss bereavement specialist or a counselor. Could you take a bit of time off work for the last few days to spend with your pet and to begin to process that loss? You might again look into hospice care. There are 2 places out there, Vet Angel and Bright Haven, that both have directories for places that provide hospice care. There isn't a lot of it, but there might be places close to you. And then think about self-care. Make sure you're getting enough rest, that you're getting a balanced diet, and that you're getting some exercise. And again, ask for help when you need it. That is part of self-care as you're going through this. End of life decisions. So, right, we're getting to the end of life and we need to make some decisions. What if my pet passes at home, right? It could be natural causes. It could be an accident, hit by a car or something like that, or it could be an illness that they've been going through. I would say on the side of illness, don't sacrifice your pet's comfort for your wishes to keep them home longer. right? And have a little more time with your pet. But one thing to think about is you're going to have some after death decisions to make, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Then we have, oops, went one too far. Then we have end of life decisions that involve a medical euthanasia, either in home or in the clinic. They have some similarities and they have some differences, right? So if we start with in home, a lot of times this is a wonderful option. If you have it, you know, you can make plans, it's a quiet place, etc. But you're going to need to check with your vet for the availability for them to come to your house to do it. Some vets don't offer this. Some of them will do it, but they don't advertise. So they might be willing to come out, so it doesn't hurt to ask, right? And if you ask and they say they don't, they may know a vet who does. Remember, it's going to be a higher cost because you're paying for their extra time to come out and not just seeing him in the clinic for that hour that you usually would see one. And again, Vet Angel is a directory that can help you find in-home hospice and euthanasia help. Thinking about anxiety, and we don't think about that too often. Think about your other pets, the pet that is ill. If you have dogs in your home or a cat in your home that are afraid of people coming into the house, having a vet come into your house for euthanasia may not be the best option for your pet, even though you feel like it's the best option for you. Think about family members, right? You can think about all the comforts you can, right? You control the setting in this setting, right? You control the music, candles lit, comfortable bedding, all those kinds of things. Who's going to be present? Family members, other pets. If we're thinking about family members, remember everyone gets to make their own choice. For some people, being present during a pet's death is not the choice they want to make. And so everyone should be allowed to make their own choice. Remember, this has to be scheduled in advance, has to be. The vet is not going to be able to do this on in the morning you call and he's going to come out in the afternoon. That just isn't going to happen. So you're going to have to plan this in advance. Plan the process that you want to have happen. Because again, you're not going to be able to think about this in the moment. So if you want to get a paw print or take a photo of your pet's paw in your palm or get a clipping or something like that, think about that ahead of time, right? If you want to have a prayer set or read a poem or play special music, get all those ready to go or write it down somewhere. Again, in the moment, these things are not going to come to you. And then in-home comes with its own set, again, of after-death decisions that, again, we'll discuss in a few minutes. In clinic, what if you decide, or there's no other option but in clinic? Again, check the availability, right? There are vets out there who don't do euthanasia under certain circumstances. If you go to a large practice with multiple veterinarians, are you going to be okay with another vet if your vet is on vacation or in surgery that day? If not, you're going to need to plan ahead and probably a couple weeks in advance, right? To make sure they're not on vacation or something. Again, anxiety comes into play. If your pet is triggered at vet visits, you can think of a couple things. First, the vet may be able to give you some, or should be able to give you some pre-vet meds or pre-visit meds to help calm your pet, because you don't want them to be scared and anxious when they go in. Or check with your vet to see if they can do it outside. All right, when we lost our greyhound, who was just in a couple slides back in March, she was terrified to go to the vet. She needed an emotional support dog to go with her for all of her checkups. So our vet did it out in the grass next to the clinic. He came out to the car and gave her a sedative. When she was starting to feel a little sleepy, we walked over into the grass. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. And she just laid in the grass and went to sleep. It was peaceful, it was wonderful, and she wasn't scared. You can bring comfort items with you, right? So think of those blankets, toys, etc., that they're comforted by. And you know, you can leave them there or you can bring them home with you. One thing you might want to think about is if some dogs are really get kind of anxious if they're always wearing their collar or their harness, they get a little anxious when that's missing. So think about not removing that right until after everything's done, because it can make them anxious in the moment and that's not where you want them to be. Who's going to be there, right? Again, there is never any shame if you're not able to be with your pet, right? I've been there. Everybody's been there. But think it all through so that you don't regret any decisions that you make later on. Is there, this is again, another reason I tell you to plan ahead so that you kind of have all these things in mind. Bring someone, if you're by yourself, bring someone with you for support, bring someone who will help drive you home after the appointment. Scheduling is going to vary. So again, depending on your vet's schedule and clinic schedule, they may be able to do it same day, but you may have to plan 2 weeks in advance. Think about the things you might want to do in the moment, right? Again, those paw prints, etc. A lot of those materials are supplied by the vet clinic. Again, think about comfort items, etc. And then again, you're gonna have to make your afterlife decisions. And again, we'll talk about that in a couple slides. And then in addition to medical euthanasia, we have behavioral euthanasia. And I included this topic because I work through it with my clients, on more than a few occasions. I've gone through it myself. It's something that is seldom discussed in public circles. And those who have to go down this path are often shamed and blamed and ostracized. And I can assure you that this is a path that no pet owner has ever wanted to take. And it is not a decision that anyone takes lightly. When you bring your pet home, just like everyone else, we all envision a close relationship and a lifetime full of adventures with that dog or cat or whatever. And when it's not what your reality ends up looking like, it is going to impact every facet of your life. And so when the behavior reaches a certain point, and it's going to be different for everyone, these pet parents are left with few options. And I can promise you that they have tried all the internet suggestions. They have tried training, often multiple trainers. They have hoped for a medical cause so their pet could just be fixed and be fine. They have tried different behavioral medications, different dosages, different types. They may have worked with a veterinary behaviorist if they've been able to do that. And many of them have spent a lot of money in pursuit of trying to help their pet. Right? They have looked at rehoming options. However, rescues and shelters don't take dogs who have bite histories and severe behavioral issues for good reason. There is liability attached to rehoming such a dog. Not to mention the ethics of placing a dog who has a behavior history or a bite history in a different home, not only for the new owner, but for the new public surrounding that dog and for the dog themselves, because they may get worse as they leave the home that they're used to. And sanctuaries are simply not realistic. There is no unicorn farm that has a fenced yard and no visitors and no children and no other pets, right? We think about, again, quality of life, not quantity of days lived as your guide. So a pet that struggles to live in their world and is not helped by medication or behavioral modification interventions, they don't have a good quality of life. And an animal that is living in a crate, hiding in the bathroom all the time, or languishing in a shelter kennel, they don't have a good quality of life. They don't have a dog in a kennel that's been in a kennel for 5 years doesn't have a family to take care of them. They don't have a warm bed to sleep in. They are in a kennel 24/7 with a few breaks during the day. That's no life for a dog. So those who have been through this experience are impacted by their decision for the rest of their life, right? We have to consider the quality of life and the mental health of the owners as well as the dogs, right? They might feel guilt, right? Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I tried everything, but maybe it wasn't enough, right? Their relationship with their pet could be highly conflicted. On one hand, you love that animal to the depths of your being, and you know they are the best of the best of the best when they're not struggling. But when the animal begins to struggle, you're left with anxiety and fear around what's going to happen, right? A bite to one of your kids or a relative or a friend, or what if another dog or another animal is injured or killed? What if I'm evicted, right? What if I lose my home insurance? What if I have a $100,000 lawsuit filed against me? Those are all valid questions to think about. And then society piles on the blame and the shame for killing a healthy dog and not having tried hard enough, or I would never do something like that because my pets are my family. Well, you haven't been faced with that yet, right? And so the decision to choose euthanasia for a physically healthy animal that is struggling mentally and emotionally is one of the absolute worst experiences that anyone can ever go through. However, if we go back to quality of life, the decision is clear. A pet living in a chronic state of arousal, of fear, of anxiety, has no better quality of life than an animal that is suffering a chronic disease. So if you take nothing else from this presentation, I would ask that you really think about whether behavioral euthanasia is any different than medical euthanasia, right? I went through this over 20 years ago and it still follows me. In all those years, I have told barely a handful of people anything more than he had a neurological problem, right? 20 years later, it still follows me. There is some hope out there for people. Losing Lulu is a wonderful special support group on Facebook. It was created specifically to support anyone who has gone through the experience of behavioral euthanasia, whether you're an owner or veterinarian or trainer. And I would encourage anyone who has gone through that to join this group because it is such a wonderfully supportive group for anyone who's gone through this. And so finally, what about those afterlife decisions that I'm going to have to make under any circumstance, right? So let's say you plan to bury your pet. Okay, well, first of all, you need to be prepared to transport your pet if they didn't pass at home. And I've done this. It can be very, very difficult if you have a plan for it. You need to check your local, your county, and your state statutes and zoning to make sure that you're able to bury your pet where you want to bury them. Backyard burials are not allowed in a lot of places. If you choose cremation, you're going to have the option of group cremation and private cremation, and they're going to ask you the day you go in for the euthanasia. And so again, plan ahead so that you're not hit with this in the moment of, oh my God, I don't want to think about this right now, right? You've got your list of, here, this is what I want. A private cremation is going to be more expensive, but you're going to have the option of having your pet's ashes returned to you. Do you want the ashes returned to you? Do you want to keep the ashes? Do you want to spread the ashes? And again, you need to check to see if you're able to spread ashes. In some locations, you might have the option of aquamation, which is a water-based kind of alternative to cremation where you're going to end up with quote unquote ashes as well. And so you'll have the same types of options for that as you would with cremation. So you're going to have some afterlife decisions to make. And then after death comes grief, right? And each of us travels our own unique journey through grief. Everyone's experiences and timeline are going to be different. Even if you have experienced pet loss more than once, each time is going to take you on a different path. And so there are going to be many things that are going to affect your journey as you move through it. So it could be the circumstances around the pet's death. It could be the nature or the quality of your relationship with that pet, how they passed. It could be the age you are at the time. Your gender could come into play, right? Men are told you don't cry in public, etc. Could be your personality, your mental or your physical health in the moment. Whether or not you have a support network to help you get through it. Could be your religious or your spiritual beliefs or your lack thereof. Do you have effective coping skills to help you move through those stages of grief? And then there's those who have had a conflicted or an unfinished relationship with their pet, and that can be very complicated. With behavioral euthanasia, as I mentioned, the overwhelming grief that some experience, but then there is also that lack of closure that accompanies a pet that goes missing and is never found, or one that you were forced to leave behind for some reason. And so when we think about it, you know, in contemporary Western society, grief has become kind of an emotion that we're taught just, you know, you keep that private behind closed doors. We don't show our feelings and we don't discuss grief. That's all taboo. And grief that occurs after the loss of a pet is so very often discounted and misunderstood and underestimated by those around us who maybe don't have a pet and they've never experienced the grief or the friendship of a pet. But I am here to tell you that your grief, however you experience, it is real and your feelings are valid. And so feel those feelings and go through that grief, because that is how you move through and go on with your life after your pet. So when we think about grief, we often think about the stages of grief, right? The denial, anger, bargaining, etc. So, grief is just a normal process we have to go through. Each of us, again, is going to experience it a bit differently. But when we think about these stages, these aren't, boxes that you can check off or rooms that you walk through in some linear fashion. Instead, it's very fluid, right? You may remain at one stage of grief for longer than others with one pet versus another. You may not even experience one of the stages, or maybe you go back to a stage that you had been in and you went out of, and then you're back in it again. When we think about the stages, often the first one's denial, because it's just that psychological protection mechanism that kind of prevents our mind and our body from being overwhelmed by the reality of the loss, right? Then there's anger, right? This intense emotion that this is so unjust. Why did this have to happen? It could be directed at the pet. It could be directed at yourself. It can be directed at those around you, those you love, the medical staff. Then there's bargaining, right? If you let me have my dog back, or if you don't let him die, I will blah, 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 right? Again, this is another way of avoiding the reality of the loss, right? And then once that loss is realized, there's a depression. And then finally, we have acceptance, where we learn that the pet is gone and we begin to accept that. Kessler came along and he decided that those 5 stages weren't everything. He decided there was a 6th stage, and I like this stage. This is the stage that he calls finding meaning. And this stage involves remembering those who have died with more love than pain, the stage where you find more joy in the memories than in the pain of their loss. Right? I think that's a good stage to be in. Warden came along and thought that the stages were kind of too static, and he thought they should be more like tasks that you had to complete. That felt better to him and more complete. So he talked about accepting the reality of the loss, right? So fully realizing that they're gone and they're not going to come back. And how can you accept the reality? Maybe a farewell ritual like a memorial or a burial or something like that can help. And, in the case of rehoming or a pet that's been lost or missing, that's really hard to accept the reality of the loss if you don't have the reality of this pet in front of you. Experiencing the grief, the pain of grief through tears, through sadness, anger, perhaps even guilt. This is crucial stages to experience grief. Adjusting to their absence, right? They're not getting us up in the morning. My Finn is no longer with his nose right next to my ear snoring in the morning. And we just have to get used to the new normal. And then emotionally reinvesting in relationships and maybe in another pet, and understanding that that doesn't erase or diminish the love that we feel or felt for that pet that we lost. Oops, there we go. And so regardless of the form it takes, allow yourself the time and the space to grieve, and remember that grief and mourning are a natural and a necessary part of healing, right? This quote, I don't know if you call it a quote or a little poem. Sometimes grief is a friend you wish you didn't know, but that you have to spend time with because love brought them along to the party, and the party was worth it. So what might you experience as you go through grief? These are going to be all kind of attached to the stress and the emotional distress associated with that loss. They come in like 4 categories. So physically, you might have fatigue, you might want to sleep all the time, you might have insomnia, you might have nightmares, loss of appetite, pain, headaches, muscle tension, you might get sick, you might feel nauseous. Emotionally, you might be sad or angry or guilty or feeling empty or in disbelief or numb. Cognitively, you might have difficulty concentrating. What was I doing right now? Again, this is one of those reasons why I'm telling you to plan ahead, because of these cognitive things that we know may happen. A lack of focus, intrusive thoughts, and then behaviors. So you withdraw socially, you lose interest in your favorite activities, agitation. You might do things to try to gain control again, right? I'm going to clean my house like mad. I'm up doing laundry at night because I don't know what else to do with myself, things like that. You may find that you experience a little bit from each category. You may find that you are mainly in one category. It just depends. Everyone, again, is a little bit different. Whoops. I really like this BREATHE acronym for the importance of self-care. It was developed by Sandra Grossman, who runs Pet Loss Partners, who was one of my mentors when I went through my certification. And BREATHE stands for first breathe. There are only two things I must do today: breathe in and breathe out. When it becomes overwhelming, remember to breathe. Rest. Grief is exhausting, right? You probably already know grief is exhausting. Be sure to take the time to rest your heart, your mind, your body, and your soul. Eat and exercise. Remember to eat at least one healthy meal a day and try to get in some light exercise. Ask for and accept help. You don't have to go through this alone. Time, take all the time you need. Grief has no timeline, right? It's the time that it takes. Honor your heart, your mind, your body, and your relationship with your beloved pet, and do what feels right, as long as it's healthy and positive, right? Don't do risky things or dangerous things. And then finally, eternal. Remember, the love that you share with your pet is eternal. Death does not end a relationship, it's just changed it, right? So never forget that. Support. So again, allow family and friends to help and ask for help. So maybe someone says, let me grab you some groceries. Let me make your dinner. Can I pick your kids up after school? Can I walk your other dog? You know, those tiny little things can make a huge difference. Support groups can help out online or in person. Seeing a therapist or a grief specialist, either in a group setting or an individual setting. There are lots of books out there, books of poetry, books about grief that can help as well. And then again, just never forget you're not alone. So reach out when you're feeling alone. I would invite anybody to join my support group on Facebook. It's Pause and Remember with the ampersand, Pause and Remember Pet Loss Support Group. Feel free to join that, and I do monthly group support sessions. And then we have memories. What about memories? This is another quote that I just love. Memories are magic, said Bear. I think they're sad, said Rabbit. How can something sad be magic? Not all memories are sad. Some are happy and full of love, replied Bear. But they're still memories. They're gone, and that's sad, said Rabbit. Sad as if they never existed, said Bear. Memories are proof that those we've lost, or excuse me, those we've loved existed. We can make them appear whenever we need them, and that's magic. So, memorialization, right? Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Memorialization is another important step in processing grief. It helps you remember your pet, going through pictures and videos of your pet when you're ready. Don't do it right away when you're feeling like you're just not ready for that. It helps you express and embrace your loss. It helps you honor your love for your pet and your loss. It allows you to maintain a bridge to your relationship with that pet. And it encourages sharing with others, telling stories and sharing the joy that you had with your pet. How can you memorialize your pet? Oh my goodness. There are so many ways. If you Google memorialize a pet, oh my gosh. So you've got your standard plaques, urns, paving stones, jewelry with ashes, etc. But you can have pottery made, you can have jewelry made, and you can have art made with ashes, right? You can have your pet's ashes mixed with paint and a painting painted. This blown glass egg in the picture has the ashes incorporated into it. The pottery urn has the ashes incorporated into it. There are some fantastic tattoos out there for memorializing a pet. You could donate to a charity or shelter or rescue organization in your pet's memory. You could plant a tree or plant. When I was looking, there's even an organization in Florida that's using pet ashes, and they're creating these ocean reef projects. So they're creating these templates with ashes containing them and dropping them off into the ocean. And it's helping build new reef things to help those reef animals survive and build new communities and new colonies. You could hold a memorial service. If you're really struggling, it can really help to write a letter to your pet. And then finally, when we think about, okay, am I ready for a new pet? So we're going to ask ourselves, am I emotionally ready? Am I financially ready? What about my family members, right? Just because you're ready doesn't mean your family members are ready. So everyone has to be on board with this decision. Do I have the time? And what about my existing pets, right? So when you think about this, and it's hard to think about, I'm going to go out and get a new pet right after I lost Fluffy 2 months ago, because that sounds just crass and unfeeling. But when you think about it, when I lost Finn, I glommed on to my other 3 pets to help me get through that loss. And so going out to get a new pet, if you're ready and it feels right, can really help you get through that loss. And it doesn't make you have loved your pet any less or anything like that. It's just a way to help you get through and cope. One thing I would caution is bringing home a new pet during the later stages of your pet's life. If your pet is currently like mine, 13 and a half and 14 and a half, and starting to enter those sunset years and losing their hearing and losing their vision, I would kind of caution against bringing home another young pet or a puppy, just because it can be really stressful for that older animal, and it can cause you to have to split your attention between when you might want to be concentrating on your only pet who's nearing the end of their life, and that new animal that you're trying to train and house train and crate train and all those kind of things. So those are kind of all things to really kind of think about when you're thinking to yourself, am I ready for a new pet? And you may say in the moment, I'm never ever going to get another pet. This was too hard. But don't say never, because down the road a little ways, you may feel a little bit different when things have settled and you've started to get through that pathway of grief. So that's all I have for you. Again, if you would like to reach out to me, you can find me on crimsonhound.com on my website. If you have any questions that we don't get answered here, reach out to me on Gmail. Join my Facebook page, and you can also find me on Crimson Hound Training on Facebook. And I will just leave you as we go into questions with this last quote.
Wow. How beautiful. Thank you so much for your presentation.